Chapter 4 For the Living Lost. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a golden hue across the quiet village of Phandalin. Inside the Stone Hill Inn, Morthal Pashtor was already awake, his armored silhouette framed against the window as he watched the sun ascend. He turned to his companions, still lost in slumber.
"Rise and shine,"
he called softly, his voice steady but insistent.
"We have a journey ahead."
Ilara Morningvale opened his eyes, the ever-present shadows lurking within. He silently gathered his twin swords, their familiar weight, a constant reminder of battles fought, and yet to come. Doreen stretched languidly, a mischievous grin playing on her lips.
"Always the early bird, aren't we, Morthal?"
"Discipline keeps us alive,"
Morthal replied, a hint of a smile tugging at his stoic demeanor. Zyra Darkmire adjusted her crimson cloak, ensuring every fold fell just so.
"I do hope this healer appreciates us trudging through the wilderness on her behalf,"
she remarked, her tone dripping with feigned indifference. Balin Stonehammer holed his heavy glaive.
"Can't say I'm thrilled about missing a good breakfast."
The party set off, the dense forest gradually thinning as they approached Umbrage Hill. The windmill stood solitary in the valley below, its sails turning lazily. Ilara paused, squinting into the distance.
"Odd place for a windmill?"
Doreen mused.
"You'd think they'd build it atop the hill for more wind."
Balin's gaze sharpened.
"Hold a moment,"
he rumbled.
"There's something circling above."
All eyes turned skyward. A dark shape soared around the windmill, wings beating with a menacing grace.
"Too big for a bird,"
Ilara observed. Zyra's breath caught, her heart pounding as time seemed to slow. Could it be Cryovane, the dragon they had been warned about? No, this creature was smaller, though no less formidable.
"It's a manticore,"
Ilara declared, a mix of fear and excitement in her voice. A distant scream pierced the air. "Help! Someone, please!" Morthal's eyes narrowed.
"We need to move. There is someone in danger."
Ilara didn't hesitate, sprinting toward the windmill. Doreen followed, arrow already nocked. Zira lifted her chin, arcane energy crackling at her fingertips as she strode forward with calculated grace. Balin lingered.
"I've got a bad feeling about this,"
he muttered, but reluctantly followed, his pace cautious. As they drew closer, the manticore's grotesque form became clear. Lion's body, bat-like wings, and a tail lined with deadly spikes. Ilara shouted,
"Over here, you fiend!"
He let loose an arrow that struck the creature's flank. Doreen's shot followed, embedding itself near the first. The manticore roared, turning its malevolent gaze upon them. Zyra's eyes blazed as she unleashed a volley of magic missiles.
"Feel the wrath of the dragon,"
she whispered, the bolts searing through the air. Morthal charged, shield raised.
"Stay together,"
he ordered. The manticore lunged, its tail whipping forward to release a hail of deadly spikes. Morthal raised his shield just in time, the spikes thudding into the metal.
"Is that all you've got?"
he taunted. Ilara felt a familiar darkness stirring within him, a volatile mix of fear and rage. He dropped his bow, drawing his swords as he dashed toward the creature.
"Ilara, wait!"
Morthal shouted, but Ilara was already upon the beast, his blades a whirlwind of steel, each strike fueled by a desperation he couldn't name. The manticore snapped its jaws and swiped its massive claws, narrowly missing Ilara as he danced around its attacks. Doreen hesitated, unable to get a clear shot without risking her friend. Zyra unleashed a firebolt, aiming carefully to avoid Ilara. Flames scorched the manticore's wing, eliciting a pained shriek. Morthal rushed in, swinging his hammer with disciplined fury.
"We do this together."
The manticore, now wounded and desperate, lashed out wildly. Ilara seized the moment, plunging both swords deep into its chest. The creature staggered. Doreen released an arrow that found its mark in the manticore's throat. With a final gurgling roar, the beast collapsed. Ilara stood over the fallen monster, his breath ragged. Without warning, he began hacking at its neck, each strike more frenzied than the last.
Ilara, stop.
Morthal approached cautiously.
It's done.
Ilara didn't seem to hear. Blood splattered across his face, a crimson mask that concealed the torment beneath. Doreen moved closer.
Ilara, please. You're scaring us.
She said softly. He froze, the weight of their gazes pulling him back to reality. Slowly he lowered his swords, the manticore's severed head now detached. Balin emerged from behind a boulder, a spade in his hands.
Well, looks there is no need for my spade,
he said sheepishly. Doreen rolled her eyes.
Always ready with this shovel, aren't you?
A soft voice called out. Is it safe? A woman stepped hesitantly from the windmill, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and relief. Zara turned to her, smoothing her cloak.
The beast is slain, thanks to our efforts.
The woman looked at Ilara, covered in blood. Are you injured? Zira moved toward Ilara, concern flickering across her features before she masked it.
He's fine. Just enthusiastic.
Ilara avoided her gaze, wiping his blades clean. He caught a glimpse of compassion in her eyes before she turned away. I'm Adabra, the woman said. I can't thank you enough. Morthal inclined his head.
We were sent to warn you of dangers in the area, but it seems they found you first.
Adabra nodded solemnly. I will pack my things first thing in the morning and head to Phandalin. Inside the windmill, they sat around a modest table. Adabra offered them warm bread and herbal tea. Ilara scrubbed the blood from his skin, Doreen assisting pouring cold water from a bucket.
You fight like a man possessed.
She remarked quietly. Ilara shrugged.
Old habits.
Outside, Zira stood apart from the group, gazing toward the distant peaks of the Sword Mountains. Memories tugged at the edges of her mind, the jeers of villagers, the loneliness of her youth, and the mysterious father she never knew. She hummed softly, the words of his song echoing in her thoughts.
I walked alone in forest deep, where ancient bones in silence sleep.
Balin approached, offering a canteen.
Stout?
No, I'm good.
Zira shook her head, still buried in memories. He nodded.
These mountains have a way of stirring up old ghosts.
She glanced at him.
Do you believe in fate, Balin?
He shrugged.
I believe we make our own paths.
Soon after the party resumed their journey toward Nomengard. As the sun dipped low and the path grew steeper, they made camp under a canopy of stars. Zira sat alone, humming the same melody. She pulled a worn piece of fabric from her pocket, a fragment of a banner, its colors faded. Morthal approached quietly.
You can't sleep?
She looked up, slipping the banner out of sight.
I'm just thinking.
He settled beside her.
The stars are particularly bright tonight.
She nodded absently.
The mountains remind me of a song my father once sang.
Would you share it?
He asked gently. She hesitated, then recited softly.
There on a tree I saw it wave, a banner from a warrior's grave.
Morthal listened intently.
Sounds like a tale of burden and destiny.
She sighed.
My father found the banner on an old battlefield, said it carried a weight, a curse perhaps. He passed it to my mother before he left.
Morthal considered her words.
And now you carry it.
She looked away.
I don't even know what it means, just fragment of a story.
He met her gaze.
Sometimes the weight we carry isn't meant to be borne alone.
She arched an eyebrow.
Offering to share my burden, Morthal?
Perhaps,
He replied.
or at least to help you find the meaning in it.
She allowed a small smile.
Dear Morthal, always eager to help.
He chuckled softly.
Comes with age, I suppose.
She stared back at the mountains.
Take the banner if you dare, but know the weight it's bound to bear.
He shook his head.
I have never heard that song. But still, it feels familiar. Maybe we're all seeking to understand the weights we carry.
For a moment, the wall she kept so carefully constructed seemed to waver.
Maybe.
She whispered. The next day, the party arrived at Nomengard. The entrance was whimsical, adorned with colorful fungi and intricate carvings.
What a charming place.
Doreen remarked. Morthal led the way, ducking slightly to navigate the low ceilings. They soon encountered a group of gnomes engrossed in culinary experiments.
Greetings.
Morthal began.
We've come with a warning and seek your leaders.
One gnome looked up, goggles askew. Fibblestib and Dabbledaub are down the passage past the spinning blades, he said nonchalantly.
Spinning blades.
Balin echoed warily.
Of course,
Balin muttered.
Why wouldn't there be spinning blades?
They pressed on, and Morthal stepped into a cavern. A sharp voice rang out. Don't move! Morthal froze as a mechanical contraption whirred to life. Without warning, a bolt shot forward, striking him in the shoulder.
By the gods!
Morthal staggered back, pain searing through him. The machine sputtered and clanked, smoke billowing from its gears. Blasted thing, the gnome operator cursed, kicking it.
Are you mad?
Zera snapped.
You could have killed him!
The gnome waved her off. Not my problem. Need to adjust the tension. Morthal gritted his teeth, pulling the bolt from his armor.
We're here on important business.
I don't care, the gnome replied, engrossed in his malfunctioning device. Doreen glared at him.
Charming hospitality.
They moved on, Morthal insisting he was fine despite the wound. Further in, they came upon a rickety suspension bridge swaying over a deep waterfall.
I'll go first.
Doreen volunteered, stepping lightly across. One by one they crossed until only Balin remained.
Not a fan of heights,
He grumbled.
Come on, Balin.
Zyra urged.
We haven't got all day.
With a deep breath, he made his way over, the boards creaking ominously under his weight. Navigating safely past the spinning fans, thanks to Zira's spell, they reached a spacious cavern where two gnomes were engrossed in animated discussion over a table cluttered with blueprints and odd gadgets.
Excuse us.
Morthal called out, his voice echoing slightly.
We seek Fibbledob and Dabblestib.
The gnomes looked up in unison. One had wild silver hair sticking out in all directions, goggles perched atop his head. The other wore a tool belt bristling with peculiar instruments. Who? Asked the gnome with the goggles.
Dibbledaub and Fabblestib,
Morthal said unsurely. The gnomes looked at each other with confusion in their faces. Then suddenly they both seemed to understand something. That's us, exclaimed the gnome with the goggles. I'm Fibblestib, and this here is Dabbledaub. What brings tall folk like you to our humble abode? Morthal stepped forward.
We come bearing a warning. There's a threat of orc attacks in the area, and possibly worse. You must prepare and take precautions.
Fibblestib exchanged a worried glance with Dabbledaub. Orcs, you say? That's troublesome indeed. Dabbledob sighed. As if we didn't have enough problems already.
What do you mean?
Ilara asked, his eyes scanning the room for any signs of danger. Fibblestib gestured around exasperatedly. Our king, Korboz, has lost his mind. He's imprisoned our other king, Gnerkli, claiming a carpet attacked him. Says he's keeping Gnerkli captive for his own protection.
A carpet.
Doreen raised an eyebrow skeptically. Yes, a carpet, Dabbledob affirmed, and 2 of our fellow gnomes have gone missing. We fear the worst. Morthal's expression grew serious.
In my travels, I've heard tales of creatures that can mimic objects, shapeshifters that take the form of mundane items to ambush their prey.
A mimic.
Zira added thoughtfully.
It would explain the attacking carpet.
Fibblestib's eyes widened. You think such a creature is loose in Gnomengard?
It's a possibility,
Morthal replied.
We can help you, but we'll need to talk with your kings.
Dabbledob nodded vigorously. If you can rid us of this menace, we'll be eternally grateful.
Very well,
Morthal agreed.
Take us to King Korboz.
The gnomes led them through a maze of passages until they reached an ornate door. Who are these outsiders? Korboz demanded, clutching a scepter tightly. Morthal stepped forward with a respectful bow.
Your Majesty, we are travelers who wish to aid you. We've heard of your troubles.
Korboz narrowed his eyes. Aid me? Unless you can vanquish the cursed carpet that attacked me, there's nothing you can do.
That's precisely why we're here,
Morthal assured him.
We believe a shape-shifting creature is behind this. Allow us to deal with it, and your realm will be safe.
The king glanced anxiously at King Gnerkli, who sat clued to a chair. I've secured King Gnerkli, for his protection, of course. Korboz continued. Only if you eliminate the threat and bring me proof, I'll release him.
Agreed,
Morthal said firmly. The party retreated from the throne room, re-entering the labyrinth of tunnels.
We should start searching storage areas.
Ilara suggested.
Places where a mimic might hide.
They began systematically exploring the adjacent chambers and storerooms. Numerous storerooms were filled with barrels and crates, but they found nothing except gnomish inventions and supplies. After a while, Morthal realized.
Wait, where are Doreen and Balin?
A ripple of unease passed through the group.
They were right behind us,
Zira said, concern creeping into her voice. Ilara's eyes scanned the dimly lit corridor.
If the mimic is about, they could be in danger.
Morthal's jaw tightened.
We need to find them quickly.
Retracing their steps, they hurried back through the tunnels. In the storage room they'd just left, they found Doreen still rummaging through assorted items.
Doreen!
Zira exclaimed.
What are you doing?
Doreen looked up sheepishly.
Well, I thought there might be something valuable hidden in here. But it's all just gnome stuff.
Ilara couldn't suppress a slight smirk.
Find anything worth pocketing.
She sighed dramatically.
Not unless you have a sudden desire for self-stirring spoons or spring-loaded socks.
Morthal shook his head, relief evident on his face.
At least you're safe. But where's Balin?
Just then, Fibblestib scurried up to them. If you're looking for your dwarf friend, I saw him heading toward the exit with a barrel of our finest mushroom wine. Zira raised an eyebrow.
Of course he is.
Morthal rubbed his temples.
That dwarf will be the death of me.
Ilara placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder.
At least we know he's not fallen victim to the mimic.
Speaking of which,
Doreen interjected.
we still have a shapeshifter to find.
Agreed,
Morthal said, regaining his composure.
Let's focus. The mimic could be anywhere.
They continued their search, moving deeper into Nomengard's intricate tunnel system. The atmosphere grew tense as shadows played tricks on their eyes, every object a potential threat. Zira glanced at the peculiar gadgets lining the walls.
With all these oddities around, the mimic could easily blend in.
Morthal nodded.
Stay alert. If anyone notices anything unusual, speak up immediately.
Finally, the party entered a cluttered storage room filled with peculiar gadgets, tools, and barrels stacked haphazardly.
Hold on.
Doreen whispered, pointing to a barrel that seemed out of place.
That one looks different.
Alara nodded.
The wood grain doesn't match the others. Let's take a closer look.
They approached cautiously, as Ilara extended his sword to tap the suspicious barrel, making a scraping sound. Behind them, another barrel began to warp and contort, transforming into a grotesque creature with a gaping maw lined with jagged teeth and a long, slimy tongue dripping with corrosive saliva.
Watch out!
Zira shouted, her eyes flashing with alarm. She quickly unleashed a volley of magic missiles, the arcane bolts striking the mimic and causing it to shriek. Morthal tried to charge forward, but piles of gnomish inventions and debris blocked his path.
I'm coming,
He called, struggling to push through the clutter. The mimic lunged at Ilara and Doreen. Ilara dodged swiftly, slashing at the creature with one of his swords. His blade cut into its rubbery flesh, eliciting a guttural growl. Doreen circled to its side, stabbing with precision. Greenish ichor oozed from the wounds, sizzling as it hit the floor.
Careful! Its blood is acidic!
Ilara warned. The mimic reared back, its body shifting and bulging in unnatural ways. It lashed out with its slimy tongue, narrowly missing Doreen as she ducked beneath the swipe.
Keep it distracted.
Zira commanded, her hands weaving intricate patterns as she prepared another spell. The creature's cold, soulless eyes fixated on Zira, sensing the arcane energy. It began to slither toward her, overcoming obstacles with disturbing ease.
Not so fast!
Morthal shouted, finally breaking through the debris. He swung his hammer with all his might, striking the mimic and knocking it off course. The mimic hissed, its form rippling. Ilara seized the opportunity, delivering a swift strike to what appeared to be its torso. Doreen followed suit, her blade finding a vulnerable spot. Zira focused her energy, eyes narrowing.
This ends now.
She released a blazing fire bolt that struck the mimic head-on. Flames erupted over its body, and the creature let out an unearthly wail. Suddenly, the mimic began to bloat, its skin stretching and bulging grotesquely. Veins pulsed visibly beneath its surface, and a low, ominous rumble emanated from within.
It's going to explode.
Doreen yelled, scrambling to find cover. Zira's eyes widened in panic.
Oh no, not on my attire.
They all braced themselves, expecting a violent eruption, but instead the mimic's swollen form shuddered violently before collapsing inward with a horrifying crunch. The creature imploded, sucking in air and debris around it, and then fell silent. A small pile of inert, bubbling slime remained, slowly sizzling and corroding the floor beneath. Everyone stared in disbelief.
Well, that was unexpected.
Ilara remarked, lowering his swords cautiously. Zira let out a sigh of relief, carefully inspecting her robes.
At least it didn't splatter us.
Ilara gave a slight smirk.
Always looking on the bright side.
She glanced at him.
One must find solace where one can.
Morthal approached the remnants cautiously.
Stay back. The residue might still be dangerous.
Morthal surveyed the group.
Is everyone unharmed?
They all nodded.
Good work,
He said.
Let's inform the kings. Our mission here is complete.
As they made their way back through the tunnels, Doreen fell into step beside Zira.
You handled yourself well back there.
Zyra offered a modest smile.
Team effort. Though I must admit, I was more than a little concerned about another wardrobe casualty.
Ilara walked a few paces ahead, his expression thoughtful. Morthal noticed and matched his stride.
Are you all right?
Ilara hesitated.
Just reflecting on how we operated as a unit, it felt cohesive.
Morthal nodded appreciatively.
We're learning to trust each other's strengths.
Perhaps that's it.
Ilara agreed softly. They reached the throne room to find Fibblestab, Dabbledob, and both kings awaiting them anxiously. "Did you vanquish the beast?" King Korbos asked, wringing his hands. Morthal stepped forward.
The mimic has been destroyed. Your people are safe once more.
A collective sigh of relief swept through the gnomes. King Nerkly smiled warmly. "You have done us a great service. We are in your debt." Fibblestib clapped his hands excitedly. "This calls for a grand celebration." "A feast," Dabbledob announced, "in honor of our heroes." The celebration was lively, filled with music and laughter. Plates overflowed with exotic dishes, and cups were filled with sparkling gnomish brews. The celebrations reached their peak when the two kings stepped forward to address the gathered gnomes and their honored guests. With voices filled with gratitude, they praised the heroes for their bravery and resourcefulness in ridding Gnomengard of the mimic's threat. As a token of their deepest appreciation, they presented each hero with a magical item. The presentation of these gifts was met with enthusiastic cheers, marking the pinnacle of the festivities and sealing the bond between the heroes and the gnomish kingdom. Ilara received a clockwork amulet. He turned it over in his hands, the intricate gears reflecting the torchlight.
A reminder,
Doreen said softly.
that precision can be just as powerful as passion.
Zyra accepted a wand of pyrotechnics with a graceful nod.
Perhaps it has its uses.
She mused, imagining the spectacle she could create. Morthal was handed a hat of wizardry. He placed it atop his head, grinning.
How do I look?
Like a cleric trying to be a wizard,
Doreen quipped. He laughed.
Perhaps it'll keep my head warm.
Later, during the lively festivities filled with music, dancing, and an abundance of gnomish delicacies, Morthal found Zira standing slightly apart from the crowd, gazing thoughtfully into the distance. He approached her gently.
Enjoying the celebration.
She offered a faint smile.
It's charming in its own way.
He nodded, then hesitated before speaking.
I've been thinking about the song you mentioned, the one your father sang.
She looked at him curiously.
What about it?
The line, take the banner if you dare, but know the weight it's bound to bear.
She considered his words.
A tale of burdens and choices.
Exactly,
Morthal agreed.
Perhaps the banner is a symbol of accepting one's past and the responsibilities that come with it.
She sighed softly.
It's possible. I've held on to it, unsure of its true meaning.
He met her gaze.
You don't have to decipher it alone. Sometimes sharing the weight makes the journey easier.
A moment of understanding passed between them.
Thank you, Morthal,
she said quietly.
Your wisdom is appreciated.
Across the room, Ilara sat with Doreen, who was examining her new collapsing pole.
Thinking of selling it?
He asked. She grinned slyly.
Perhaps, though I might find a use for it yet.
He chuckled.
Always resourceful.
She looked at him thoughtfully.
You know, you were impressive today. Quick on your feet.
He shrugged modestly.
Just doing what's necessary.
She nudged him playfully.
You just can't accept a compliment, can you?
He allowed a small smile. As the evening wore on, the party felt a renewed sense of camaraderie. The challenges they'd faced had not only tested their abilities, but also strengthened the bonds between them. The next morning, as they prepared to depart, the gnomes gathered to bid them farewell. "Remember," Fibblestib called out cheerfully, "you're always welcome in Gnomengard." Morthal adjusted his pack.
We appreciate your hospitality.
Zira glanced back at the colorful tunnels.
An unforgettable experience.
Doreen patted the pocket where she'd stashed the collapsing pole.
And profitable, in its own way.
Ilara looked toward the path ahead.
Shall we?
They set off, the sun casting a warm glow over the landscape. As they walked, Morthal found Zira humming softly.
The song?
She nodded.
I can't seem to get it out of my mind.
He smiled.
Perhaps the banner isn't just a weight, but also a guide.
She tilted her head.
A guide?
Yes.
He replied.
A symbol that connects you to your past, but doesn't have to dictate your future.
She considered his words.
I suppose I never thought of it that way.
After a moment of silence, she recited a line softly.
Carry it where your path may lead.
And suddenly Morthal continued,
Through shadows dark and winds of need.
She looked at him appreciatively.
You have a good memory.
Some words are worth remembering.
I walked along in forest deep, where ancient bones in silence sleep. A battlefield long left to time, where rust and shadows intertwined. There on a tree I saw it wave, a banner from a warrior's grave. Faded red and gold's last gleam, like something pulled from distant dreams. There on a tree I saw it wave, a banner from a warrior's grave. Faded red and gold's last gleam, like something pulled from distant dreams. Take the banner if you dare, but know the weight it's bound to bear. A tale untold, a curse unspoken, a restless heart forever broken. An old man came from mist and air, with eyes that knew a heavy care. He said, this cloth is not for dead, but for the living lost instead. I took it down, I held it tight, and felt the pull of endless night. Dreams of battles lost and torn, of wandering nights who still mourn. Take the banner if you dare, but know the weight it's bound to bear. A tale untold, a curse unspoken, a restless heart forever broken. Carry it where your path may lead, through shadows dark and winds of need. The banner waits its story long, a mystery in its